All right, familia, I want to take a moment to let you know that today we need to get serious because perreo is no joke. In the summer of 2019, a storm of outrage swept through the city of San Juan. Activists began using social media, swiftly transmitting rally details and protest coordinates, syncing the city's pulse with hashtags like Ricky Renuncia and Puerto Rico se levanta. This was a year before the summer of racial reckoning in the US. News outlets around the globe began covering the protests. Decades of colonialist policies and governmental abuses, made worse at that time by the Ricardo Rosselló administration's mishandling of Hurricane Maria relief, corruption scandals surrounding his cabinets, and the Ricky Leaks, a collection of damaging messages between the governor, his cabinet, and aides, all came to a head on the streets of Old San Juan and other parts in the island. The flames of revolution were further stoked when Residente, his sister Ile, and Bad Bunny dropped their Rosselló diss track, Afilando los Cuchillos. They did so directly to YouTube. The song became a battle cry for the movement, with lyrics that spoke to the Puerto Rican discontent and fury. As the song goes, El pueblo no aguanta más injusticia. Estamos afilando los cuchillos. Llegó la hora de un combo de miles en motora. The people are fed up with the injustice. We're sharpening the knives. The time has come for thousands to come together. This musical call to action rang all across the island, as Puerto Ricans began to realize that they could no longer bite their tongues. A swell of voices began coming together to speak one message, one simple request. Ricky, renuncia. Ricky, resign.
And the youth are the ones that are out in the streets, that are putting their bodies on the line.
This is Ashley Mayor. Together with Patricia Velázquez, they co-direct the Hasta Abajo Project, an organization aimed at fostering dialogues between Latino communities that bridge the gap between reggaeton and its socio-historical significance.
The music that they listen to keep them, motivated, to keep them active and awake, and to give them the strength to kind of continue there for hours at times in a protest.
And it wasn't just the auditory impact that energized the youth. An unexpected and potent cultural force emerged. Perreo combativo. It was marked by unfiltered lyrical narratives woven into pulsating rhythms. It was both artistic and subversive, a crucial tool in this revolution. The electrifying embodiment of these sentiments through impassioned dance became symbolic of the protest movement's fervor.
The impact was because people from the LGBTQ plus community put their bodies, like non-binary people, trans people, were dancing in front of the church.
This is Patricia Velázquez, co-founder of the Hasta Abajo initiative. As she puts it, what made Perreo Combativo so impactful and important in these protests was that
it was people who are often marginalized and rejected, owning their body and putting their body out there and dancing freely, manifesting through that made Perreo Combativo so powerful.
And that power could be seen and felt outside of the governor's seaside mansion, La Fortaleza, as the streets moved in synchronized motions, choreographing a visceral rhythm of societal change and creating an emotional resonance that deeply mobilized a new wave of activists. An emotional resonance that even mobilized artists and entertainers as icons of Puerto Rican culture began harnessing their own platforms, showcasing an artistry beyond their craft. I am your host, Lilia Luciano. In this episode of El Flow, we'll discuss the cries that led to the 2019 protests, how the rise of reggaeton's subversive art form inspired a new generation of activism and changed the course of Puerto Rican history. You're listening to El Flow, Season 2, Episode 7, Without perreo, there is no revolution. Amidst the revolutionary fervor, 3 unexpected champions emerged from the music scene: singer Ricky Martin, trap artist Bad Bunny, and rapper Residente. This trio embraced leadership roles, amplifying public discontent from Puerto Rico's streets to the global stage. They mocked our dead, they mocked our women, they mocked the LGBT community, they made fun of people with physical and mental disabilities. Enough is enough. A national treasure to Puerto Rico, Ricky Martin transformed himself into a vocal advocate for political transparency. His voice echoed marginalized voices via social media, and in the streets, he proudly waved the pride flag through the crowds of tens of thousands of protesters. The masterful lyricist Residente channeled his powerful verses into the movement. His poetic revolutionary words illuminated social disparities and government corruption. Beyond his lyrics, he organized rallies, converting streets into platforms for civil discourse. And holding up the real Puerto Rican flag with its sky blue triangle, Bad Bunny praised the crowds and commended those who had overcome their fears and came out to demonstrate for the first time. Puerto Rico welcomed the generation that won't allow itself to be stepped on. Benito's public appearances with protesters solidified his commitment. His fusion of rhythms and truths empowered both himself and the masses.
Bad Bunny was like one of the biggest artists in Puerto Rico. People were there because he was there. Through him, people understood the importance to put your body there. That's what it made such an impression, the presence of so many people.
Their physical involvement bridged art and activism, increasing support and renewing the movement's energy. Governor Ricardo Rosselló would take to Facebook Live to send a national message to all Puerto Ricans. He said, "Los he escuchado. Una gran parte de la población no está feliz y lo reconozco. I've heard you. A large portion of the population is unhappy, and I recognize it," announcing he would not seek re-election in 2020, but he would not resign. We'll come back to this after a short break. The Ricky Renuncia movement was a record-breaking one in Puerto Rican history. More than 750,000 people protested over more than 2 weeks, the largest protests in the island's history. During the manifestations, reggaeton wasn't just background noise, it was the driving force for unity and change. But to understand the motivations behind this enormous outpouring of public dissent, we need to take a step back and delve into the elements that led to the movement. To the beats of reggaeton, Puerto Rico's resilience had had enough. It had been tested through a series of crises that exposed not only its vulnerability, but all the other consequences of poor governance as a result of colonialist policies. The fury of Hurricane Maria laid bare the unpreparedness of the local government and the federal government's disinterest and inability to handle a crisis of such magnitude on the island. In the wake of the hurricane, Puerto Rico's energy crisis deepened the plight of its citizens. Decades of mismanagement and underinvestment in the power grid left Puerto Rico grappling with prolonged blackouts. The darkness cast over communities underscored the fragility of the energy infrastructure and exacerbated the challenges of post-Maria recovery. And to add insult to injury, the Rosselló administration, sworn in amid high hopes, found itself mired in scandal that exposed, at the least, a culture of insensitivity and arrogance. Over 800 pages of leaked chat messages, rife with derogatory language and mockery of citizens, peeled back the curtain on a government out of touch with the people it served. In the face of these crises, Puerto Rico's cultural identity emerged as a powerful unifying force. Throughout it all, its music, a symphony of resistance, became a channel for expressing frustration, hope, and determination. Bad Bunny put it best in El Apagón, Puerto Rico está bien cabrón.
I think that there's a lot just kind of socially to understand about what's happening. Obviously, understanding that, Bad Bunny is speaking about his experiences as a Puertorriqueño.
This is Ashley Mayor, who we met earlier in this episode.
Going through apagones, going through Maria, going through all of these very devastating kind of events in recent history for Puerto Rico, and singing about it in his songs and sharing his own experiences. Part of the enormous significance of reggaeton is really the way in which personal stories connect to larger things going on historically and socially in Puerto Rico.
What makes these personal connections vital is
how you consume reggaeton, how you share and distribute reggaeton, the way in which we listen to it during these social moments and gatherings. Those are all an important part of the story, just as much as the creation and production. It's the way that the people are experiencing reggaeton along with the musicians. That interplay that I think is important.
At the forefront of this interplay is reggaeton, a genre that has transformed itself into an anthem of resistance, sparking discussions on cultural representation, empowerment, and the power of diverse narratives. But reggaeton's journey has been anything but smooth. Early on, the genre faced vehement criticism from traditionalists who dismissed it as crude and offensive. As Ashley puts it,
represented a lot of the kind of obscenity and criminality that people find distasteful.
Nevertheless, reggaeton persisted, carving out its space in the musical landscape and challenging the status quo. News reports and debates around the genre's content became emblematic of its subversive power, a power that Ashley says
reggaeton replicates the same pattern that society has towards any new emerging music that breaks barriers and breaks boundaries, and particularly music that's associated with youth or with social change.
What some saw as distasteful was actually the lived experiences of the artists themselves. They wrote down and performed the realities of the world they saw around them. Artists like Daddy Yankee, Ivy Queen, and Tego Calderón became pioneers in this movement, using their music to address these inequalities, social struggles, and personal experiences. And as the popularity of these pioneers has grown, so too has the genre's acceptance around the world.
Now that we see, not just the commercialization of the genre that comes about kind of in the mid-2000s, but also with the global phenomenon that it is today, the kind of heavy popularization that becomes more palatable and more okay to listen to reggaeton.
But at its core, reggaeton remains subversive and also visceral, unearthing conversations that are tough to be had. And as Puerto Ricans, these artists aren't just speaking for themselves, they're speaking for an island of shared experiences. Every verse representing a moment in time for a people that have endured. They write about their cultura because
we're not saying reggaeton is culture just because Bad Bunny is the biggest artist in the world right now. We're saying reggaeton is culture because it has always been culture. Because it's part of people's experiences, because people make culture.
As Bad Bunny puts it, being Puertorriqueño or Boricua means that being a legend comes natural to us. Because no matter what we achieve, nothing makes us prouder than saying, I am from P-R. Now, a new generation whose voices, bodies, and expressions are being inspired by the same subversive music and dances that were once seen by many on the island as being taboo. This is a generation harnessing their culture to demand social and political changes. We'll continue with more after a short break. In the summer of 2019, La Fortaleza, the governor's seaside mansion in San Juan, witnessed incredible artistic demonstrations. Musicians played, artists turned spaces into protest canvases. The street in front of Fortaleza was renamed Calle de la Resistencia, the street of resistance, emphasizing the movement's impact. Tensions between protesters and police occasionally flared, highlighting the lengths people went to be heard, but they never turned deadly as they did in other places that protested that same year. And the voices were making waves. Beyond physical streets, social media amplified the protests. Videos and updates flooded platforms, broadcasting to the world the call to change on the island. Unity and solidarity were the weapons of choice for the Puerto Rican people, as they called for justice against government misconduct, placing immense pressure on an already fragile administration. With his cabinet depleted, his allies turning away from him, and even his family stepping away from La Fortaleza, Governor Ricardo Rosselló found himself, quite literally, in a fortress of solitude. Outside, the streets pulsed with a renewed vigor. In a moment that would be forever etched in Puerto Rico's collective memory, Rosselló stepped up to the cameras and said, "He tomado la siguiente decisión. Hoy les anuncio que estaré renunciando. I've come to a decision. Today I'm announcing my resignation." In a speech acknowledging the pains and frustrations that the island had endured, and after more than 2 weeks of protest and global outcry, the embattled governor relinquished his post, succumbing to the inexorable pressures of an island united in its demand for change.
Nacimos en el barrio de los pobres. Y si ganas el respeto, te pagan lo que cobres.
In a world where music often mirrors society's complexities, reggaeton stands as a prime example of how art can be a catalyst for change. Beyond its catchy rhythms, the genre confronts norms, amplifies unheard voices, and challenges the very fabric of culture, embodying the culture itself, uniting the shared experiences of its artists, its people, and its history. Reggaeton's lyrics remind us that the most powerful music is often the most subversive. And among the genre's most subversive, we find Benito Antonio Martínez Ocasio, but you probably know him as Bad Bunny. In the next episode of El Flow, we delve into Benito's transformation from a modest son of Puerto Rico into the global icon, Conejo Malo, whose beats can be heard across every corner of our world. A cultural phenomenon whose influence has even inspired the lecture halls of academia. Learn more about the world of Bad Bunny on the next episode of El Flow. The second season of El Flow was written and produced by Álvaro Céspedes and Reynold Gutierrez in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network and is hosted by me, Lilia Luciano. Edited by Carmen Graterol. Fact-checking by Samedi Aguirre. Executive producers are Carmen Graterol, Rose Reed, Isaac Lee, and Lilia Luciano. Sound design by Pachi Quiñones, Hugo Mendoza, and Gonzalo Messi. Special thanks to Verónica Hernández and Pedro Aguirre. Our executive producers at iHeart are Giselle Vances and Arlene Santana. For more My Cultura podcasts, listen to the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite shows.